A very good evening and good afternoon indeed from Kigali. If you're watching us right from Kigali here in Rwanda or elsewhere around the world, it's a new program, 360, here on RwandaTV, and we're thrilled to be bringing you different topics, current affairs also in Rwanda and elsewhere around the world. Now, let's start it off by taking you 75 years ago, when the UN Charter was signed, which is the birth certificate of the UN and the bedrock of the international cooperation, which remains just as valid today. Now, in a few days from now, which is September 21st, a special high-level session will be convened in New York to commemorate the UN 75th anniversary and to look back at numerous achievements and progress made in the area of peace, security, sustainable development, and human rights, which are the three core pillars of the UN. To tell us more, we're discussing this specific topic, looking back at 75 years of the UN, looking at EU-UN cooperation, looking at UN-EU-Rwanda cooperation. We'll be examining all those in the next 1 hour. But to tell us more, to help us break this down, I'm joined by the UN resident coordinator, who is Ford Ndiaye, a regular visitor here on RwandaTV. Thank you so much for finding time to speak to us. We're also joined by EU Ambassador to Rwanda, Nicola Belomo. He's a regular visitor as well. We thank you so much for finding time to speak to us.
Thank you for this opportunity.
I understand Sunday is not always easy. You're resting to start a week ahead, very fresh. But thank you indeed again for finding time to speak to us. Now, let me begin by taking you back. We see different dates when it comes to UN, when it was formed and all that. I understand there is September 24th. There's also June 26th, 1945. So which one is the exact date that the UN was formed? And tell us more, a little bit about those dates before we look at the video that we have.
Thank you very much, Efan, and thank you for having us. And thank you also to Ambassador Belomo, my friend Nicola. The charter was signed on the 26th of June 1945 in San Francisco by 850 delegates. But among them, we only had 4 women.
Interesting.
It was signed by 50 countries, and among them, we only have 3 African countries. Then the entry of 4th is the 24 October, 24 October 1945. This is exactly in each country where we are celebrating the UN Day globally. But every September, we have the General Assembly. That's why you have this 75th with this global gathering on the 21st September. But the day of UN is 24 October 1945. Now,
I understand. How many countries did you have? Of 54 in total at the beginning?
At the beginning, 50 countries did sign the charter, with 4 women among the 850. So, of course, I must say that UN has made really progress on that matter. Now, at the leadership level, we have a parity within UN. 50-50 between men and women, including the resident coordinators.
Interesting.
We have now 55 African countries joining the UN. We have a total member state of 193.
We started with 3 countries in Africa.
3 countries in Africa. And now we have 55.
And we had all the EU, I can say probably, all the countries from the region, from the European region.
Indeed, indeed. And allow me at the very outset to congratulate the UN team, my friend, the resident coordinator for the Ndiaye, on this important occasion, and the whole one UN country team and family in Rwanda, and also to pay tribute to the UN personnel, serving very often in very dangerous and difficult context, and our special thoughts to those who have lost their life in serving for the UN and serving all of us over the last 75 years. The UN and the European Union are natural partners. As you mentioned, since the very beginning, we've been extremely committed and involved in building a multilateral system based on peace and security, promotion and protection of rights, and of course aiming at the development of our societies. And we, I would say, come from the same seeds, the seeds of dialogue, cooperation and solidarity. And let's say we share the same roots, I would say. And after the devastating World War, we decided at regional level for the EU, at the global level for the UN, to come together and move from confrontation and conflicts to dialogue and cooperation.
Talking about the cooperation between the UN and the EU, we have a short video that I want us to take a look at before we indulge more into this conversation. Let's have a look. There you go, you have it. It's 360. Now we're talking about UN at 75. And let me begin with you, Mr. Ndiaye. As the world, and of course here in Rwanda, as we look at back 75 years of the UN, it was formed, the 75th anniversary, which is going to be celebrated under the theme, The Future We Want, the UN We Need. What has been the challenges and the achievements, briefly? Of course, you cannot detail everything, but what has been the major challenges of the UN over these years?
Yeah, I think that in my view, you always need to transform every single challenge into an opportunity. And for the UN, we need to highlight why the UN was born. It was after, as Nicola already said, the Second World War. So if you look at the achievement, one key achievement I can see is really the UN, of course, with all its member states, has prevented the world from the scourge of having a Second World War since 75 years. It's not a small achievement if you look at the conflicts between countries and all this. The second aspect, which is important, is really the work on human rights, upholding principles and values on important things. We forgot to highlight that the Declaration, the Universal of Human Rights, it was in December 10, 1948, which was after the UN. And if you look at many constitutions in the world, they have withdrawn some elements from this declaration. And this is the most translated document in the world, including in Kenya, Rwanda. We do have a translation of that. So upholding the Charter principle on human rights, dignity is also an important aspect. Third element, I think that UN has been at the forefront on supporting development in critical areas. Let me give you an example, because we are in the COVID-19. Do you know that smallpox claimed the life of 500 million people in the world in the 18th, 19th to 20th century? And it was stopped by joint action, coordinated by WHO.
So we are not even close when you look compare it to
No,
COVID-19.
not at, people are, of course it is an important pandemic, the COVID-19. But even for this pandemic, WHO is providing all the guidelines, all the elements, and we delivered 120 million protective personnel equipment to countries in the world. Last 2 points before maybe I give example on Rwanda. On the humanitarian side, do you know that without UN, many children in the world will go to bed with hunger? Be it WFP, be it UNICEF, they are working with UNHCR and others at the forefront on supporting humanitarian development. The aspect of peacekeeping, and I really want to thank Rwanda on that matter. Rwanda is one of the top contributors to peacekeeping mission in the world.
That's true.
Now, last point on the development agenda, the world has come together for the first time on the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, looking at 8 critical areas that we need to move on the education, on gender, on poverty, on all the food security and other aspects. And September 2015, we came up with a more ambitious program, which is the Sustainable Development Goal. And if we achieve this goal, the world will be better for all, because the goal is catering for the people, for the planet, for prosperity, for peace, and it is grounded on partnership. This is all what we are implementing in Rwanda. If you allow me 1 second or two, in Rwanda. In Rwanda, we have cooperation framework, which is a United Nations Development Assistance Plan, 2018-2023. And this plan is totally aligned with the National Strategy for Transformation, looking at economic transformation, social transformation, and transformational governance. It's a 630 million plan with 280 million available to deliver on those areas. We supported policy changes, be it on nutrition, on agriculture, on health, including the preparedness response plan, both for the Ebola virus disease and the COVID-19. We supported the access to services, water, sanitation, hygiene, education, health, nutrition. We supported studies like the demographic dividend, whereby it was used by the government in framing the conversation on policy change. Agriculture with the EU, all the analytical work that we are doing on food security and vulnerability. Accountable governance and deepening democracy, support to election, the scorecard that help frame the conversation around the civic society engagement, the citizen partnership. Last 2 points, the youth, which is very important. Rwanda started Youth Connect with $50,000 from the UN. Now it has gone viral. We have 20 African countries lining up in implementing Youth Connect. 676 youth that were trained have created 10,000 jobs. And now in Africa, last year, we have 10,000 young people from all over the world discussing the youth. And we have the launch of Generation Unlimited. On the gender, I will stop there. On the gender, Rwanda is leading, and UN is proud to have been partnered with the government in supporting the gender machinery, on budget sensitive, on the aspect of really gender-based violence with Isange One-Stop Center. And all these are really together with the EU and their member states. And that's the important aspect. I can come to other elements
Of
as
course,
well.
of course. We still have a
flow.
few minutes. And I want to bring in Ambassador. What do you think, looking at this, 75 years, the reason we am asking you is because at that time, of course, EU came in a bit later than when the UN was formed. But do you think the UN has done what it's required to do to implement its key priorities, which are, of course, in the area of multilateral cooperation?
Indeed, and thank you for the question. And if I may, just would like to, I could not agree more actually with what has been mentioned by my brother Fode, and especially because the EU and its member states are the largest financial contributor to the UN system. So whatever was mentioned by Fode at global and local level, it represents indeed something where we as European Union are involved directly or indirectly. So we always highlight the relevance of this multilateral cooperation, the relevance of the United Nations, and we reiterate our strong commitment for a rule-based international order with the United Nations at its core. So as European Union, we are extremely committed at global, regional, and local level. If I may also to complement also from an EU perspective on the main achievements, I would say, at the global level, I totally agree, and I would measure the success of the United Nations also in terms of how many wars have not been fought and how many lives have not been lost. So we tend to lose sight of these extremely important element. And also in economic terms, if you look at the economic performance and trend over the last 30 years, how many millions of people have been left out of poverty, thanks to this multilateral approach, thanks to dialogue and cooperation at different level. So we should all be proud about these achievements, because we are the UN. That's always what I say. And I think it's extremely important to support the United Nations, but also taking a critical assessment and look at how the world is evolving. So with the emerging of multipolar, world, and also with more complex challenges that we all face. At local level, we are extremely proud of the cooperation between the government of Rwanda, European Union, and the United Nations in support of the ambitious development objectives of this country, and in supporting the principle of leaving no one behind. There is a very long list of projects and initiatives that, we develop together. Allow me in 1 minute to flag a few of them. I would say we can hardly refrain from mentioning that in the immediate aftermath of the '94 genocide against the Tutsi, the European Union was in the forefront in supporting the United Nations systems and the government of Rwanda in providing humanitarian assistance, supporting the creation of the tribunal, the criminal tribunal of Rwanda, and last but not least, also in supporting the Gacaca local dispute settlement systems. So we're extremely proud of that work. Secondly, I referred to the ambitious development objectives of this country. This cannot be possible without reliable statistics and data. We are extremely proud of our work with the UNDP, with UNFPA, in supporting the creation of the Rwanda Statistic Institute, which also, thanks to our support, today is one of the leading statistic institutes in the continent.
And it's doing great.
That's an extremely important element of the, I would say, the development equation. Then, Fode, you mentioned the work with UNICEF, with UNDP and other WHO and other UN agencies in supporting the country in achieving a number of Millennium Development Goals. You mentioned the work on nutrition, on maternal mortality, a number of extremely important, achievements and good records of this country as also the result of this multilateral cooperation. More recently, we have a number of joint activities. I would mention just two. One in the framework of the emergency transit mechanism in support of these vulnerable people stranded in Libya. The European Union immediately joined the government of Rwanda and supported the establishment of the transit mechanism in Gashora, with the support of the United Nations and United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in particular. Very last, as I think environment, protection of the environment and fight against climate change are on our respective, on top of our respective agendas. I would like to highlight, first of all, to commend the work of the government of Rwanda and the sort of the ambitious, let's say, and active role that the government of Rwanda is playing at multilateral level. And I would like to mention a very recent kind of effort referring to the establishment of a global treaty on plastic, where Rwanda is really in the driving seat with support from the European Union in the framework of UN organizations. So we can be extremely proud. I mean, we could go on and on.
Absolutely.
I understand. There are many, but he mentioned smallpox earlier on, and we are facing COVID-19 right now. And one of the key issues that have been reiterated by the executive director of World Health Organization is the cooperation that is needed, especially when the vaccine comes into play. But I want to know the role of the UN and EU in making sure that that cooperation is in play, because we've seen a lot of nationalistic agenda when it comes to fighting COVID-19, but even when the conversation about the vaccine has come into play, how do we make sure that we avoid that national interest and look at the global interest in fighting COVID-19?
Let me say that COVID-19 has more than ever shown the necessity of international cooperation and multilateralism. It is very clear that no one will be safe unless all of us are safe. Therefore, the Secretary General took various initiatives which are very important and relevant to your question. One is really to call on ceasefire, to help peace being the basis of this international cooperation. The second is really to support the vaccine for all. And we had a very good conference with EU and others on the vaccine, and we had the pledge of more than $8 billion on research and development to make sure that we have vaccine for all. Number three, I think that even if vaccine is available, you need to have on the ground resilient health system. So the Secretary General also spearheaded with other international financial institutions like the World Bank, the IMF, the debt and the G20, the debt relief, in order to secure more domestic resources for countries to support the fight against COVID-19 at country level. Now your question raised, obviously, a clear discussion, because mainly when you have crisis in my country, when they say that when all birds are in flame, you first cut for your own bird. So every single country is saying that let's get our coverage. But I think that the WHO is spearheading and supporting this trial in vaccine. I think that we have 170 vaccine trial, but of course 5 or 3 are at the late stage on that. And that's what we are trying to do together with the UN. Now, I don't know if you want me to talk about what we are doing in Rwanda, but...
I would appreciate that.
Yeah.
I would appreciate that. Yeah.
But I think in Rwanda, what we are doing is very clear. First, we said that international cooperation is important. Therefore, me as the co-chair of the development partners, We made sure that all the development partners are coming together in supporting the government, preparedness and response plan in health, but also in supporting the government in economic and recovery plan. Because this is not only a health crisis, that has triggered a huge economic crisis. We support the government with technical expertise in testing, in monitoring the patient, in health treatment, in even, the robots that we supported with the UN, in making sure that health workers are safe. We also provided support in social protection, in food security, in making sure that we have access to education. Continuity of services is very important in this pandemic. And that's also something that we have done. We also thought that we need to provide the government with policy brief and recommendation. Therefore, we carried out a joint assessment on the impact of COVID-19 on the economy, looking at the impact on the gross domestic product, the GDP, the impact on informal sector, on vulnerable people, even on increasing gender-based violence and children because of the lockdown and other elements. And all this has been provided to the government in supporting them. We even put together the UN staff to put voluntary contribution. We managed to get 12,000 voluntary contribution from the staff themselves to support this. And we have designed a joint program in supporting it. UN is not a financial donor.
12,000 US dollars, you mean?
Yes, that's for the staff.
Yeah, for the
but
staff.
for our program, it's 12 million US dollars. We are not a financial donor. What we need to know is that we are providing knowledge, technical expertise, catalytic financing, and partnership, bringing in global knowledge from our 193 member states down to this area. So I think that these are the cornerstone of all that we are doing with the partners. But if you allow me, as it is a dialogue, two things that I want to add to my initial talk before giving back the floor. One is, I think UN also was involved in regional integration. And it's very important when we talk about COVID-19 and building back better and greener, as it was mentioned. Therefore, we supported competitiveness strategy for the government to take advantage of the African continental free trade area, and also cross-border trade and other elements that are important, e-commerce. And above all, we are in the process with EU to support the integrated national financing framework, which will be looking at all the financial flows, how they could support the government as we look at the shrinking fiscal space, the debt issue, and others in supporting the government, finding the right measures in the financial to implement the NST and the Vision 2050. And of course, all this is done with the European Union and other development partners.
And that's why I want to bring him in, the cooperation about COVID-19. And
Right. And if I may just to once again highlight really the convergence. I mean, we could easily swap the chairs, I can tell you. Absolutely. I mean, whatever Fode mentioned is 100% on our agenda. And I would like also to highlight, if I may, an element that you mentioned, Fode, which is linked to the coordination role of the UN. And even beyond the specific and concrete joint projects and activities, it's extremely important to highlight this kind of exchange and constant cross-fertilization that we have at the level of the partners groups here in Rwanda, in collaboration, in let's say, synergies with the government and other stakeholders. And this is an extremely important element that we need to highlight when it comes also to the partnership with the European Union. In relation to COVID, I mean, at the global level, there is no doubt this is a global challenge. I don't think that, the virus knows no borders, and nothing will be solved until it will be solved globally. And so this is the reason why, as European Union, we immediately developed a global response which is part of our comprehensive response to the COVID crisis, which is a combination of humanitarian, health, but also socio-economic dimension of this crisis. Here in Rwanda, we developed what we call a Team Europe approach, meaning that we're trying to bring together the work of the European Union and what our member states are doing. And of course, this has been done in close partnership with the authorities and the European Union. I can proudly say we are the largest contributor to the COVID response in Rwanda. Even the robot that Fode mentioned are proudly made in Europe. So we are a part of that process as well. So in Rwanda, again, we appreciate the timely and effective response to this crisis, which has allowed us as international partners also to support this process with a clear vision, a clear leadership, and this is facilitating our work. And it's no secret Rwanda is considered as a kind of a model in many respects. And this is again the result of a strong, let's say, multilateral approach. We are working in particular as European Union in the socio-economic response. Number of our member states are equally involved on the health component, but the socio-economic response is an extremely important one, even in the more medium and long-term perspective. Of course, it is no secret that this crisis generated a lot of economic, let's say, crisis on the ground, and especially in the informal economy, the tourism industry is another sector which is extremely affected. And we as European Union, we're trying to support the government into the response of this. Only a couple of days ago, we had a very productive and informative high-level policy dialogue with the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Local Government in order to assess the implementation of the recovery plan and to see the added value of the support that European Union is providing to this crisis. It goes without saying that we also feel part, as I mentioned, to the efforts of the UN, the WHO, and all the agencies and the entities at UN level that are involved into this process. In addition to the strong support to the appeal of the Secretary General and other European, which was mentioned, I would also like to refer to the debate on debt relief, which is another global discussion to support and help these economies to bounce back. So the debt relief would be another extremely important element. And of course, it goes without saying, we are and we will remain strong supporter of, let's say, vaccine for all. So that would be extremely important to fight, I would say, nationalism in relation to the vaccine, exactly, and to the treatment.
Before we move on, I want at some point to talk about the role of UN and EU on peace and security. But before we get there, this is the last question about COVID-19, I guess. This COVID-19 has been an equalizer. You know, whether you're a developed country, whether you're a poor country, we've all been affected equally. What does this teach us as the world, as the UN, as the EU, as the world, to prepare better for the future global health crisis?
First of all, let me echo what my brother Nicolas said. I think the WHO DG said it very clearly. Rwanda is a front runner when it comes to the fight against COVID-19. It has been highlighted in a press conference globally. And as you can see also, Rwanda is the only country for which, you know, Schengen space is open. Yeah. So meaning that. And all the colleagues that I'm seeing coming to Rwanda are very well impressed by the measures taken at the airport. We feel safe here in this COVID-19 crisis. So kudos to the health workers in Rwanda, kudos to the leadership, kudos for all the engagement of the communities. I wanted really to highlight. Now, coming to your question, I think what it teaches us, three things. We all belong to the same humanity and mankind. It teaches us also humility. Wealth does not help you buy your health.
It doesn't.
At least the COVID showed it. In Africa, I have seen prominent personalities passing away with this COVID-19. You know them, you are a journalist. It teaches us also the importance of looking at the necessity to get rid of inequalities. Even in countries where they are having their way through out of this COVID-19, we are seeing that inequalities are taking their toll. I will not name it. You have a big country where they are seeing based on, your position, even sometimes the color of your skin, let's name it, racism and others, that some people are hardest hit by this pandemic than others. Fourth element that it teaches us is the importance of sciences and technology. Science will help us. Technology is already helping us in assuring continuity. You cannot have education without, teleworking is on the rise. People are looking at the best way to find the solution. It teaches us also that we need to invest in human capital. It teaches us the importance of building resilient health system. It teaches us how the world is interconnected.
I agree.
And that is important, that when you are finding this complexity of this crisis, interconnectivity will help us bring together, and I like the idea of the President Kagame, who was chairing the broadband, when he said that how do we tap on digital cooperation in making the world better for all of us. So to me, to end with that, the most important lesson of this is how do you reduce or get rid of poverty, of inequality, increase inclusion, including the work that we are doing here on disability and exclusion with the European Union and other ambassadors, build wealth, use sciences and technology to inform whatever decision we are taking. But above all, how countries are, leadership. That's what the Secretary General said. We call on global leadership to have smarter leaders bringing in more resources, but based on people engagement and citizen engagement to make sure that we are one humanity. As long as we doubt that we are one humanity, I don't think that we'll get out of this COVID-19.
I know he has tried to exhaust everything. I don't know if you have anything to add. How do we make sure that we prepare better for the next pandemic? I understand we'll need to take a short break. But before we talk about peace and security, very important component.
Well, yes, indeed, there is no doubt. I mean, we all belong to the same humanity. And as I mentioned, this virus knows no borders. It's a very important lesson to all of us. If I may bring to another element into this discussion as a kind of follow-up in terms of homeworks for all of us, this pandemic is also being accompanied by what we call the infodemic, which is the emergence of a lot of, let's say, information, including, unfortunately, fake news and a number of information which are not conducive, let's say, to this collaboration at local and global level. And I think there is a need to address these issues. And I think if you ask me what is an area that more than ever multilateral cooperation is needed, I would not have any hesitation whatsoever to mention, among others, of course, the importance of filling this gap into the governance of this IT society and information society. It's very important to find common rules, to find a shared platforms to agree on a binding, probably legal instruments to govern this information society. Otherwise, we will all pay the price of misinformation, fake news, and this is not, of course, a good thing.
You're still watching RwandaTV 360. We are reviewing the UN at 75. We are looking at EU-UN cooperation, but we're also looking at the future of UN after 75 years. We take a short break. When you come back, it's still the same discussion. Gentlemen, I think you need water.
Okay.
You've just joined. In case you've just joined us, you're watching RwandaTV 360. We are looking at the future of UN. We are reviewing UN-EU relations. We are looking at how these two, UN and EU have been part of Rwanda's development, but we're looking at what have they got, the challenges along the way, and what can be done better to make sure that EU and UN and Rwanda play their part in making this world a better place. Now, 3 core pillars of the UN. We have peace and security, sustainable development, and human rights. But let's talk about peace and security. Looking at Rwanda in 1994, looking at Libya in 2018, 2019, even during the post-Gaddafi time, looking at countries like Somalia, looking at the immigration crisis in the one that we're having in Greece and the rest of the world. One would say that UN sometimes takes long to react to some of these global situations. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I think you're right in some points, because even some ranking UN official has said that UN and the international community failed Rwanda. Let's face it. But it is important to mention who is taking decision within UN. General Assembly resolutions are not binding. The binding decisions are taken within the Security Council,
exactly,
with 15 member states.
Where the EU has
where five member states have veto.
Yes.
And this decision, 80% of what you are talking about, so meaning the conflict and other aspect of the matter of the Security Council, are coming from Africa. But what is important is the humanitarian and the development arms, even in Rwanda, after my brother Nicola mentioned, after the aftermath of the genocide against the Tutsis, did really their work to contribute to getting Rwanda back. And still, on the humanitarian, we are doing 150,000 refugees and host communities supported by UNHCR, both from Congo and Burundi. We help repatriate many refugees, and some are playing important role even in this country. We also supported development. I don't come back to institution building, as it was mentioned, on this policy change, even on deepening democracy and governance with the scorecard, with RGB, as Prof. Shaka always said to us, the support that we had together in building all this citizenship participation. So yes, you are right, we are still having conflict, but you need always to look at the broader picture. The broader picture, as I mentioned earlier, we might still have conflict, and we need to deal with them. But now you have what we call asymmetric conflict. And that is a challenge for the UN. In many countries, I'm from the Sahel, so I was really in the peak of all this jihadism, both in Mali, Niger, and Nigeria. These are non-state actors. You mentioned Yemen, and you mentioned also Libya. These are, inter-country, fights in which also, because of the sovereignty of countries, UN sometimes has difficulties in acting. Of course, we have the right to protect that was brought in by a former Secretary General, and based on that, we are supporting with peacekeeping and others. But I must admit that UN is not really to build paradise everywhere, as one president said. It's from preventing us to be in hell. But for me, I'm more optimistic. I do think that we could still build a better world for all, but we need to face the challenges. And of course, there are some discussions that are ongoing. Even the African Union raised that, India raised that, Germany raised that, and of course, Brazil raised that on the how do we change the Security Council and as a governing body of UN. I'm only a civil servant of the UN. UN is the member state, so I think that Ambassador Bellomo is better.
I think, Ambassador, the EU has a permanent member on the UN Security Council, and I think you can definitely say something about the delays. When should we see the UN act much faster to some of these situations, issues that we see on the world?
Well, as I mentioned, we should always, we should not lose sight of the complexity of these challenges.
I also appreciate, Emeka Chishot, you mentioned about the lives that have been saved, that, but we also want to talk about those that have not been saved.
Sure. So I was saying we should not lose sight of the complexity of these challenges. And while we strongly, of course, reaffirm and reiterate our strong commitment and support to the United Nations, we, at the same time, reiterate the need to revitalize and reform the organization. This was highlighted even only a few days ago in the first State of the Union address that the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, delivered before the European Parliament. I think we need a more inclusive, fair, and effective United Nations. Of course, as you mentioned, once we can be proud of the achievements, we have to be extremely critical about a number of shortcomings. You referred to the 94 and the genocide against the Tutsi, and even former Secretary General Kofi Annan, in his speech before the Rwandan Parliament in '98, he admitted that the UN and the whole international community failed Rwanda. This is a fact. It is not questionable. So I think that is also brings us additional motivation to move forward, to align and adapt the institutional setup also to the emerging structure of the international community and the emerging and different nature of these problems. I think, again, we need to be more inclusive, and in my opinion, along with a reform at the institutional level, we should all agree on the fact that a more inclusive global governance is needed. Governments on their own are not probably enough to address these challenges. We need to develop a new level of cooperation and dialogue with non-state actors, NGOs, with the private sector, with the media. I repeat time and again the important role the media have in educating and having this pedagogic effort and accompanying a number of discussions and decisions and inform somehow the decisions of the policy makers. So I think it's very important to look at this broader picture. But it goes without saying the European Union will be in the front seat when addressing all these new challenges.
Let's talk about national issues that lead to the issues of migration. The Syria, we see the current situation in Greece. But let's not just go that far. In Rwanda, in Burundi, in Congo, these countries that are, we have a lot of refugee crisis. who should hold these governments responsible for the people who are forced to leave their countries to live miserable lives in refugee camps? And how can we end that?
I think that you need to look at root causes. In every situation, look at root causes and the complexity of the situation. I had the opportunity to engage with young people in Agadez, which is one of the important way out to Europe. There were three things that they said basically to me, and I want to echo that. One young boy said to me, "You are our elders. Help us realize our dreams in where we were born." It was a powerful statement. What does it mean? First, we need to unleash the potential of young people so that they can create wealth and jobs. No one wants to leave his own or her own country. First, so migration triggered by unequal access to education, to health, to opportunities, and to job. That's number one. We need to tackle that. And I know that with also European Union, I remember the 2018 discussion in Abidjan with the tripartite African Union, European Union, and the UN in supporting countries in dealing with this important issue of inequalities, wealth creation, job creation. 13 million African people are knocking on the door every year for a job. 10 million might get it, many of them in informal sector. We are losing 3 million. Where do you think that they might see their dreams? Number two is the issue in every single country of exclusion. The issue of lack of democracy, the issue of lack of good governance, the issue of corruption, the issue of discrimination, the issue even in some countries of racism or ethnicism. Let's face it. And we have seen it. That triggered wars. And when people are not at peace, they try to find peace elsewhere. That's important. Now your question is, who should we help? I think in my humble view, it's up to the citizen. I don't think that UN, yes, no, not the government, but the citizen should get engaged, get their right respected, and voice their concern. If you elect leaders that are not catering for your services or for your health or for your education, for your equal access to opportunities, let's make sure that you elect leaders that can do that. And I think that if you have here in Rwanda the way from the genocide against the Tutsis in 1994 up to now, your remarkable trajectory is, there is no secret. It's a clear leadership, commitment from the citizen, and clear vision. So in every single countries in Africa, citizens should stand up for their rights. They should stand up to build a better world in their own country. And of course, the UN and other international organizations can hold the government, in addition to the citizen, the civil society, the NGOs, can hold them accountable to the international commitment. If you sign on the SDG and you say that we'll end extreme poverty, we can hold the government accountable. If you sign for the UPR, Universal Periodic Review, for recommendation, we can hold the government accountable because this is them who sign off. So the citizen, the civil society, the private sector, and above all, the UN and other international organizations like African Union, looking at how we can hold the government accountable for their international commitment.
I understand. We have less than 4 minutes. We're running short of time. But your take, how do you make sure that these challenges are eliminated once and for all? We want to see people live a good health. If you are a refugee, you have the right to live a good life, but you should not be a refugee in the first place.
Exactly. And that's why I think it's extremely important to look at the root causes of this migration and even internally displacement. I mean, it's extremely important, and even from a European perspective, there is a kind of misunderstanding of these dynamics. And I think it's very important to improve the conditions, and in particular, I would like to highlight the investment which is needed in human capital, in particular in terms of skills development. I mean, we are all working now in supporting the attractiveness of Rwanda in our case, but I would say at continental level, to attract investments, to boost economic activities, to increase the internal demand. I think it's extremely important. This cannot happen in a vacuum, cannot be considered in isolation as an objective, but should be part of a broader and comprehensive vision, as Fode mentioned. And I think human capital and skills development are a key element of that equation. So as European Union, we are extremely involved and committed into supporting the government of Rwanda into developing this human capital as a step into this longer-term economic trajectory, and in particular in developing and attracting investors and promoting, let's say, a conducive business environment. Fight against corruption, and again, the work already done by the Rwanda Development Board, by all the different stakeholders involved, is already an excellent starting point. So the baseline here in Rwanda is excellent, and we will build on these in order to improve the situation. And as European Union, as United Nations, and as international community, to contribute to the aspirations and the ambitions of the government and the people of Rwanda.
As we come to the conclusion, I will not allow you to make your closing remarks, but I will ask you, give us in one statement, the future of the UN you want.
The future of a better world for all with youth at the driver's seat. Because we have the youngest generation in the history, 1.8 billion young people. And it's more in Africa. More than 60% or 65% are young people. So women, youth at the driver's seat, driving a better world for all, free of, the
conflicts
war
and all that.
shocks, including health shocks. Thank you.
Brilliant. What is the future of the UN? What is the future of the UN-EU that you want?
As I mentioned, I mean, we see the EU and the UN as part of the same coin, I would say. So I think it's very important to highlight these the synergies and the shared ambitions and objectives of the two organizations. And once again, we will contribute to its revitalization, the reform. We need to work on the credibility of this organization. And I would not agree more with the youth at the center, gender equality, and of course, the fight against climate change. I mean, absolutely. I think these are, as I see, the pillar and our real priorities for the future.
EU Ambassador to Rwanda, Nicola Belomo, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you, UN Resident Coordinator for the NDI. Many thanks for your time. Thank you. That brings us to the end of 360 today, but the conversation does not stop here. If you have any questions, any comments, the hashtag is UN75. You keep the conversation going, or hashtag RwandaTV 360. And let's talk about the UN that we want in the next few years. Let's talk about the collaboration and the cooperation we want between the EU, UN, and Rwanda as we head into a better world that we all need. As for me and the entire news team, I'm Ethan Tashobi. Until next time, bye for now. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.